Okay, ladies and gentlemen, let's get going into week 2, IHP 510, Marketing Outreach and Strategies. This week, ladies and gentlemen, we are going to concentrate on organizational analysis and its relation to healthcare marketing. Specifically, we're going to look at some of the areas that are covered in the organizational scan or environmental scan or SWOT analysis of the organization. We're going to look at those areas that we specifically need to key in on. We're also going to look at the mission, vision, and values of the organization and how they relate to the strategic and marketing plan. I want you to keep in mind as we go through this material, we are not going to hone in on very specific instances, but we will look at some general areas and some general information. Should you ever want to further discuss an area that's been developed here, please feel free to call me. I'm always available during work hours. And if I can't get to you right away, I will certainly call you right back and set up a time that we can meet. So let's get into week 2. And I've gone ahead and I've prepared some slides to go along with this particular lecture. Just a reminder of week 1, what we covered is general marketing concepts, definition of marketing, vision, mission, the relation of marketing strategy, marketing research, to the marketing process. As we move forward, again, we'll move forward into more specific areas of marketing, and we'll look into the ethical and legal aspect of marketing. We'll look at some of the specific target, some of the research options available as one prepares its market. For this week, as we always will do, I will outline the first and second assignment that we have for this week. Assignment 1 is a short paper. Please make sure you read the rubric in conjunction with the prompt and the overview that is provided in the assignment directions. This is a 1 to 2 page paper in which you are going to discuss aspects of mission and vision statements that you will look up. Now, in order for your reader to understand what we're talking about, it will be necessary for you to set forth the mission and vision statements, and normally you will find very brief, concise mission and vision statements in your research. So for example, if you go to University of Utah Hospital, I believe it's about 8 lines total that describes its mission and its vision. That would be an example of a teaching hospital. You're going to look at a hospital healthcare system. Kaiser Permanente comes to mind, United, not United, Intermountain Health, other systems that combine insurance and clinics and the hospital itself. And then you're going to look at a not-for-profit community hospital. There are many of those still available in Frontier, Nevada, Idaho, Arizona. Some of those in rural areas and some of the larger states. I think Texas is a good spot to look for a local community hospital. You'll look at an ambulatory surgical center, and you will look at the mission and vision of a skilled nursing facility. And once you look all of those up, I would recommend that your 1 to 2 page paper, and again, I will state for you, I am not a page counter, so if you go 2 to 3 pages, I'm not going to be overly upset. The assignment calls for 1 to 2 pages, and if you're able to express everything you need to in 1 to 2 pages, I don't have an issue with that. So once you've looked up those 5 different types of organizations, you're going to talk about what the challenges are in finding those particular organizations' mission, vision, and value statements. And you're going to discuss anything that you found to be surprising or unexpected. I would suggest to you that the challenges with today's internet will be a lot less than they were years ago. You're going to look at the commonality. How do the surgical centers, for example, have commonality in their visions and mission statements? You're going to look at alignment. You're going to look why is it important for that healthcare organization to align its mission, vision, and values in its marketing efforts. And then, as stated in the video and tutorial I prepared for writing, when you have something that says support your responses, that means you're going to need to bring in citations and references from, in this instance, they suggest you use your unit resources. If you want to go to that exemplary level, I would recommend you bring in additional research. And then your next assignment, assignment 2 for week 2, is going to be in the form of a marketing exercise. And that marketing exercise will be found in chapter 3 at the end of your case study approach marketing text. For this task, you're going to examine how a healthcare organization's vision, mission, and values are aligned to its marketing goals, and you're going to make recommendations for marketing strategies to ensure a larger profit for the organization. So what they've done here in the prompt, they have set you up with a specific scenario. You're to put yourself into this scenario as the assistant to the CEO, to the COO, and you are going to specifically look at and approach the exercise from those parameters set forth. You are a practice with 15 physicians, 7 nurse practitioners, 27 nurses, 10 support administrative office staff. You're going to make recommendations for the implementation of a plan that will ensure that the organization's values not only support the practice's mission and vision, but also ensure a larger profit margin for that particular organization. And the COO has given you this assignment. The first and foremost aspect of this is you're going to need to look at Teal Trust 5 behavioral norms that are presented in chapter 3 and are going to be presented here in this particular video lecture. You're going to develop a 1 to 2 page paper, and in that paper you are going to address it as the assistant to the COO, and you are going to present to the next board meeting. You're going to have to address the following information: the values, mission, and vision of the organization, the marketing strategies, and those marketing strategies must be designed to recommend that to make recommendations that will ensure the organization has a higher profit or a larger profit margin. Okay, and again, it says justify your recommendation. That's a key in for support, both scholarly and research, and for a solid argument supporting why you are making those suggestions. So let's go to the mission statement. So on our slides entitled Mission Statement, we define a mission statement as the organization's mission. Let me restate that. Excuse me, just had a brain fart there for a minute. So when we look at the mission statement, it's an organization's mission statement. It's something that is essential to its ongoing process. It is something that will help us distinguish ourselves from the other organizations within our particular community or marketplace. Optimally, a mission statement is the embodiment or the self-image of the organization. The mission expresses the following: the highest goals of the organizational strategy, which plan is designed to achieve a optimal performance and market share. Don't confuse strategy with tactics in this particular assignment. When we are talking about strategy, we are talking about how we are going to use those resources in a more of a abstract sense, how we are going to set up our strategy for our organization based on the mission and the vision. Then when we start talking about tactics will be part of a marketing plan. What tactics will we use to expand or further pull in more of market share? Okay, so when we go to the next slide and we look at a vision statement, a vision is a future statement. It's the vision of where the organization wants to be. It extends beyond the mission, which is short term, and the vision is a statement that says where we are going to be in 20-25 years. The organization's vision is the ideal future state. It is the best the organization can aspire to be. The vision statement describes the direction the organization wants to take and the desired end result of that particular journey. So it's more long-term rather than just meeting a short-term goal. It's meeting overall development and viability with the industry. When we talk about organizational values, we're looking at standards that govern the behavior of individuals in an organization. We're looking at how the organization self-regulates itself in particular areas of ethical and societal concerns. In an enterprise that encompasses almost innumerable professions, patients, providers, customers, one needs to understand that each of these constituencies, and as a group, as individuals, has its own value system. When you look at university hospitals, I suggest that when you look at a hospital system that is religiously based, you're going to find that there may be some elements of religious underpinnings, but you will not find that vision or mission statement in the 21st century specifically limits to the religious tenets of the organization. For example, Sisters of Mercy, or what we now call Trinity Healthcare, because they've merged with several other Catholic-based organizations, do not hold all of the values, specific values, as governing tools for their organization. And in order to be realistic in the 21st century, they have to adapt to and accept some things that may be contrary to their values. So that makes it sometimes hard to adjust and to meet those organizational values when you are directed by a specific situation, like in the Trinity Healthcare situation. So if we go to the next slide entitled TL Trust, these are the 5 factors, ladies and gentlemen, that you are to consider in your second assignment. And the TL Trust is an organization that specifically dealt with marketing and marketing research and design. And it suggested that the following 5 activities be considered when you are looking at the mission and vision of the organization and its achievement. And 1 is communication, 2 is to bring new talent into the organization or the culture and look at the information from making sure that those are in line with your specific organization's values. The 3rd is to revisit and refresh your values periodically. Healthcare is constantly changing. You must ensure that your organizational values keep pace with constant societal changes and familial changes. And we're going to talk about when we do the scan. Specifically, I think society and family are playing a very large role in today's marketplace for healthcare with ongoing changes. Teal also says to confront contradictory behavior. You need to provide feedback to those who do not live up to the organization's values, and you need to get them into alignment with. And then the last is to periodically solicit feedback. Ask people within your organization, both inside and outside the organization, and your stakeholders, what they believe the organization's values are based upon your current marketing and outreach programs. So if we go to the next slide, we're going to talk about that alignment between the mission, vision, and marketing strategy. Your organization must have that alignment in order to be successful. It must align its marketing strategy with the vision and mission and the stated values of that particular organization. And as you look through the various mission and vision statements, I think you'll get a feel for how organizations can vary in these different aspects in respects to the strategy of the organization. And the key imperative here is to understand that the consumer, the environment, and its needs are very important when you are formulating the mission and vision of your organization, and for you to align those with the stakeholders and communities you serve. When we talk about marketing strategy, particularly this week when we're talking about mission and vision, we must make sure that that strategy is formulated in response to our consumers' needs. In the context of healthcare marketing, consumers can be an individual, can be an organization. I would refer you back to that discussion relative to different aspects of marketing, such as direct consumer, hospital to physician, pharmaceutical to physicians, and so on. Marketing strategy must be in response to the environmental conditions that affect the particular marketplace. And we're going to look at 5 conditions this week. An effective marketing organization must continually scan its environment to assess and identify those trends that its marketing strategy must consider. And then when we go to our next slide, environmental scanning. Scanning is nothing more than the acquisition and use of information about events, trends, and relationships of an organization to its external environment. The knowledge which we use will assist us in planning our future course of action. An organization must focus its environmental scan on 5 major environmental forces: economic, technological, social, competitive, and regulatory. So if we go to our next slide, we will see a diagram of how it all ties together. In the environmental scan, particular 5 categories, you assess the trends in each of the 5 categories. You look at the impact of those particular areas on your target market, and then you adjust your marketing mix and marketing strategy. So when we specifically look at economic factors, first thing that comes to mind is inflation. We are currently seeing an inflationary trend in the United States, which is one of the first times we've seen inflation in more than 10 years. And part and parcel of this inflation is that the government is in fact raising interest rates for borrowing from the Fed, which directly affects interest rates that are available in the consumer market. And when the cost of money goes up, so does the cost of goods. You hear many different news stations freaking out about inflation. You hear many say inflation is normal and expected in a healthy economy. What I would suggest to you from a marketing standpoint, we're going to look at inflation from its impact on the spending ability of our particular consumers in the healthcare marketplace. Now you have to remember, our consumers are oftentimes underwritten by insurance companies to the extent of 80 or 90% of their medical expenses. So when we look at economic inflation in factors, we also have to consider not only those impacting the individual and its ability to spend, but also the insurance companies and those that underwrite health care, including the federal government. Here's an example of the projected healthcare cost as a percent of our gross domestic product. 1960 was represented at about 5%. We're pushing 17-18% in today's modern healthcare marketplace and environment, which means 18 cents out of every dollar today is spent on healthcare. That is phenomenal when you compare that to other industries, because, for example, the auto industry represents 3 to 4%, national defense is 5 to 6%, the service industry, particularly the technological, internet, and communications industry, represents 10 to 12%. 18% of the economy is huge in comparison to other sectors and spending. And with that in mind, a apt healthcare marketer and administrator will watch what percentage of GDP the health market represents. When we go to the next slide, this is a very important point that I want to make. The American healthcare system has come under substantial criticism for a period of time. And that criticism is we are the #1 spender per person on healthcare, yet we have one of the lowest rankings in overall health when we look at life expectancies and other factors in the OECD, which is the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, and covers all OECD countries. And those would be countries that are developed countries participating in the international marketplace, both in manufacturing and service industries. The higher healthcare expenditures mainly are attributed to technology and pharmaceutical, as well as a fragmented insurance system. We don't quite have a grasp or a handle on how our insurance companies and markets operate. We've talked about perhaps lifting the restriction and opening it up to interstate competition. And that's one of the problems we see in healthcare, is particular markets are saturated with 1 or 2 carriers, and that's it. We'll talk about that here in just a little bit, because that is a response to the regulatory environment and partially to the Affordable Care Act. Another reason we have is the amount of money we spend on pharmaceuticals and technological goods, which in America we do not have restrictions on pricing and recoupment of R&D expenses, which is another area that's been suggested we get a handle on. But for now, as a marketing executive or somebody engaged in marketing for their organization, you need to be familiar with the fact that how much we throw at it doesn't necessarily mean we're fixing the problem. One of the things that I mentioned is the income of the consumers. When we look at personal income, we look at gross income, disposable income, and discretionary income. Gross income, of course, is the total amount that you bring in before taxes. Disposable is the amount of money we have left for clothing and shelter, health care, and other expenditures after we pay our taxes. And then, of course, discretionary income is the income that's left after we pay our taxes and other necessities. Discretionary income is what we use for entertainment, recreation, and luxuries. Other than the aspect of cosmetic and other non-essential marketing plans for healthcare, discretionary income is not as big as a force in spending as would be our disposable. But we will see that oftentimes decisions have to be made to bite into your discretionary in order to meet medical. One of the leading drivers of cost in the American healthcare industry is technological factors. I would like to first point out the tyranny of technology holds that the more money we spend on healthcare, on technology, the more expensive healthcare becomes, and in many instances prices individuals out of the marketplace. Technology refers to innovations or inventions from applied science and research. As new technology enters the market, existing products or services are pushed out. And if you can think of your organization that has a 2D CAT scan or MRI, and now the 3T or 3D comes in, you've got this hugely expensive machine, but in order to remain competitive, do you move up to the next level and scrap that previous machine? It's a very expensive cost, but it is a very important decision, not only from the operational, but from the marketing aspect of that particular healthcare organization. The impact of technology in healthcare is fourfold. It affects quality, cost, information, and behavior. And they are huge influencers on quality and cost. We go to our next slide, transparency and available information. What we're looking at is in a technologically advanced society, we are seeing more transparency as to the cost and delivery of health care. And to a large extent, many of our consumer behaviors or many of the consumers' activity is intimately tied to that information that is available to them relative to cost, delivery, quality, outcomes, value, which we're going to talk about when we talk about regulatory environment and what we are now required under today's accountable care organizations, under the Affordable Care Act, under CMS regulations. It's much more expensive to deliver care with less return. The technological change in healthcare may be its greatest in this third area, of information. Both clinicians and administrative staff are affected by the advance in information, not only from a clinical providing standpoint, but from a standpoint of dealing with patients and other stakeholders who are now armed with more advanced information relative to care and the cost of care. The investment in information technology, databases, electronic medical records, and other technologically based information systems such as enterprise systems are significant in relation to an organization's overall expenditure. And we now have specific requirements of technology being compliant with federal and state standards, which also is added to the cost in a particular organization. When we move to social factors, this is one of the areas we are seeing the greatest change. We are seeing an emphasis on providing services to individuals who are immigrants to the United States. We are seeing changing demographics based on immigration. We are seeing changing social and community demographics based on migration within the United States. All of these impact the delivery of healthcare and to whom and how we market. And when we talk about the social dimension of the environment, we're more or less talking about the demographic characteristics of our population, culture, and those values that we have, which are constantly changing. And demographics are commonly referred to as statistics that describe the members of a populations of who they are, where they live, and what types of jobs they have. So if we go to our next slide, the family, this is just a comparison of the families between the 1950s and the year 2017. In the 70% of all households had a stay-at-home mom, a working dad, and one or more children. 65% of all children under the age of 15 would be living with married parents, where the father was employed and the mother was out of the labor force. And 18% of all children would have had parents who were both employed outside of the home. In 2017, that number changes drastically. 22% of children live in a married male breadwinning family, as opposed to 70. 23% who live with a single mother. Half the mothers have never been married and are the sole breadwinners. And 7% of those children live with a parent who lives with another spouse with whom they have never been legally married. And they often have blended households sharing children. So if we go to our next slide, ladies and gentlemen, we are actually looking at one of the single most influencing factors on our marketing efforts, and that is what we call the baby boomers. And if we take a look at the population that is now 65 years and older by size and percent of the population, you can see that we have a approximately 20-fold increase from 2% to almost 40%. I'm sorry, I take that back. We have a twofold in the numbers of millions. We have from 2 million to 40 million, and then in a percentage change, we have approximately 2% to 12%, which would be a 60% change. Actually, my math's off today. That would be a six-fold change. If we go to the next slide, we are actually just looking at how some of this affects the way we deliver not only health care, but residential living for individuals 65 and older. And if you will note, there are more individuals residing in what we call continuing retirement communities. We actually call them CCRCs, continuing care retirement communities, which are step-level care. And that actually impacts marketing significantly. As you will know, we see a lot of advertisements for these continuing care retirement communities. So ladies and gentlemen, if we go to our next slide, we're going to look at the competitive factors in the marketplace. And there are three types of competition: pure competition, monopolistic competition, oligopolistic competition, and pure monopoly. When we talk about pure competition, markets are open, lots of providers, lots of individuals that provide services and at competitive cost. And where we will see this is based on location is the number one aspect of marketing. When we talk about monopolistic competition, we're looking where many sellers compete and have substitutable products within the marketplace. We look at that where we have communities that have several health service organizations that provide managed care, clinical and hospital care. Competition here may involve small price changes in the cost of an insurance policy. For example, Intermountain Healthcare in Utah is one of the two major competitors in this marketplace, and if their cost of insurance goes down, it may shift many of the employers in the valley to Intermountain Healthcare, which would then in turn shift the use of their facilities as a preferred provider network. Interestingly enough, you can have more than one of these types of behaviors in a particular area, because we often consider Utah also to have an oligopolic behavior. In other words, there are two major players in this healthcare marketplace, which is University of Utah, or University Healthcare, and Intermountain Health. And then monopolies, one seller controls price, and those are broken up by regulation. The next slide is a table just showing you and setting forth what the differences are between the different types of markets. The next slide we go to is markets analyzed. When we look at the marketplace for healthcare facilities, in 72% of the metropolitan area studied, there is a significant absence of health insurer competition. And that has pushed many, including the current administration, to want to open up to interstate competition in healthcare to bring pricing down. In 17 states, a single health insurer had a commercial market that has 50% or more of the marketplace. In 45 states, two health insurers had a combined commercial market share of 50% or more, and in 90% of metropolitan areas, a single health insurer had at least 30% share of the commercial marketplace in that particular state. A lot of that is the result of the Affordable Care Act. What happened is we had a lot of failures. Before the federal government passed the Affordable Care, we had a little different distribution. Following the failures associated with the Affordable Care Act in those areas that relied heavily on insurance marketplaces underwritten by the government, we saw several carriers come in, several carriers fail, and because of the unusual competition that it created, some of the major carriers pull out of those marketplaces. I'm not going to be overly concerned that you know all about the Herfindahl-Hirschman Index or the FTC. I do want you to be aware of these acts that are affecting our regulatory environment in healthcare, and any healthcare operations or CEO executive would need to be familiar with how the federal government is controlling and limiting or allowing mergers and acquisitions in different marketplaces. When we look at the regulatory environment, there is one last area that I want you to be familiar with, and that is the federal government and spending through the CMS, which is Medicare and Medicaid, and the Affordable Care Organizations created under the Affordable Care Act. And with these organizations, what we are seeing is a specific trend towards the demanding quality, outcomes, matrices being met relative to value, and reporting requirements, and all of these add a substantial cost to the individual organization and actually eat into its profit margin, making marketing efforts even more important to the organization. It also, and many organizations don't realize this or don't leverage this, it also, if you're compliant with these particular reporting requirements, it also provides you a differential advantage you can use to advertise for your particular organization, and you can maximize market share by actually relying on the fact that your organization is compliant with and offers care that falls within the federal and state guidelines. So with that, ladies and gentlemen, reviewing your assignments, please make sure you outline the assignments using the prompts, using the overview to put yourself in the mindset of addressing that particular assignment. I do have a specific video and some PowerPoints and resources that I provided you, including a template for an APA paper. Please use that resource before you write your papers this week to make sure you're in compliance. And again, if you have any questions, please feel free to call me, 801-940-2531, or you can call me at, you can email me at p.vanash@snhu.edu. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, we will conclude this lecture.